I was a vice president at a public company, and I didn't feel like I could raise my hand and say I was struggling. So instead, I took a huge pay cut, went from managing two teams to one direct report, and still took 2.5 years to recover. We spend so much energy trying to keep up at work, at home, for everyone else that we never stop to ask what it's actually costing us. And by the time we do, the bill's already overdue. Leslie Forde has the research to prove it and the framework to help you start paying yourself back. In this conversation, we get into why high performers are the last ones to ask for help, what 4,000 parents said they need most, and spoiler, it's not what most companies are offering, and the one thing you can do today to stop the leak before it becomes a flood. Hey y'all, I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome back to the Life Management System. Inside this episode, I'm hosting Leslie Forde, a leading voice in the spaces of working moms' well-being, workplace equity, and future of work. So you can imagine why I'm totally geeked out and being able to have her here. As the founder and CEO of Mom's Hierarchy of Needs, Leslie helps organizations understand what working parents and caregivers need to thrive. Her book, Repair with Care, which of course we'll dig into some today, offers a practical framework for reclaiming time and reducing burnout. Most of all, though, Leslie is a believer that self-care is not a luxury, it's essential. Can we get an amen? And today, I'm so grateful to have her join us so we can pragmatically figure out how to make that happen. Leslie, welcome to the Life Management System.
Thank you. I am honored to be here. And there was a whole journey before Repair with Self-Care, and I love sharing what I've learned about this critical topic.
Well, let's start there. I think it's a perfect place to start. So you have used the word like you almost crashed after becoming a mom because of the stress, because of the lack of self-care, because of the high expectations that you carried. So at
Mhm.
what did that season actually look and feel like for you? And at what point did you call a timeout and say, hold up, something's got to give?
Absolutely. So it was shortly after my return to work with my second child where I completely crashed. Leading up to this, I had taken on a promotion while I was pregnant. I was assured everything would be fine. We've got your back. Don't worry about it, they said. But within a few months of coming back, not only had the strategy in the organization changed, I had several open recs that were closed. I had people who suddenly had to go on FMLA leave for unplanned, unfortunate reasons. So it really felt like I was in a new job. And I was being asked to bring my most strategic, clear thinking self to the work when I was sleeping in 90-minute increments with a newborn and a toddler. So there were just days I didn't remember driving there. There were days I would race up to the mother's room and get there after a 45-minute drive and realize I'd left my breast pump at home and I would have to drive all the way back. There were days I forgot my notebook. There were days I thought I heard a baby crying at the office. There were so many signs that I wasn't doing well, and other people started to ask me if I was okay. And that was the first time in my life where I really felt physically, emotionally, and mentally not well. And I've been lucky to be so healthy and assured that I could figure it out up until that point. So the job that I loved just became unsustainable, and I did something I never thought I'd do. Right? I am often, in that position where I hit a crossroads in my life or career. And I think when you come from, as I shared with you, my family's from Barbados, I grew up in both countries, there's a little bit of that voice in the back of my head where the answer is always to just work harder. Whatever the problem is, just work harder. But it wasn't sustainable. So I downshifted. I went from managing two departments, even though I was a vice president in a public company, I didn't feel like I could raise my hands and say that I was struggling. So I took a huge pay cut, went from managing two teams to one direct report, and it still took 2.5 years to recover.
I mean, first of all, just incredibly wise and mature to recognize that you needed to reprioritize something totally different. I think that most of the people tuning in would associate themselves as being high performers. It's inherently why they're tuning in to listen to a podcast like this is because they do care about being at their best. And sometimes being at their best is not doing what is textbook or what is traditional. And it just takes a lot of maturity and wisdom and reflection to be able to call that time out and take a step back and say, you know what, this isn't serving me in the way that I thought it was. So, first of all, Leslie, my appreciation to you for doing that. So,
Thank you.
pulling on that same thread of like, how did you choose to care for yourself? How did you choose to say I need to prioritize myself completely differently? Because I think a lot of the listeners and particularly, a lot of the non-listeners too, when they think self-care, they think like bubble bath, they think spa days. And don't get me wrong, those are all delightful. But what I hear you
Absolutely.
saying is something far more elementary and rudimentary than that. So how would you define what self-care looks like in a way that is just very realistic in the day-to-day grind?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I hesitated a little bit in using the term self care for the book and even in the work because it has come to mean smoothies and spa days to a lot of people. But Audre Lorde coined that term, the poet, activist, and scholar. And she kind of, I'm paraphrasing, said, self care is a radical act in a world that doesn't value it for us. So she put self care out there as resistance, as a way to pour into yourself and navigate your own needs when we are environmentally encouraged to be pleasing and perfectionistic and helpful and all the things to everyone around us. So I hold on to that original meaning of self-care because I think it's critical for us to show up in our families, in our careers, for ourselves with an intention that we make some space at the top of the mom's hierarchy of needs. And if it's helpful, I can describe it. So visually, what I realized the first time I drew it on a piece of paper, I realized that, oh, everything that I really value as a mom, like my children's milestones and well-being and their health, and all the responsibilities in the household, all the responsibilities in my professional role, just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those things are down at the bottom. They're the foundational things that I focus on and, dare I say, worry about. But as you get way up to the tippy top, that's where all the categories that we need to manage stress and emotional well-being are. So in my paradigm, self-care involves things like sleep and movement, stress management, healthy adult relationships, fun, learning, growth, all the things that make you feel really alive and also allow you to. I later learned this when I interviewed so many great doctors and specialists for my work in mental health companies, but also for my mom's hierarchy of needs. I learned that the cortisol in our body comes down when we're spending time on those things. So, what you need in this season of your life might look different. Like if you have a newborn, self care might look like splashing some water on your face. It might look like closing the bathroom door and taking a couple of deep breaths. But it also might look like saying, that you just can't go to that thing that you would love to go to because you would rather rest or you would rather get a good night's sleep. It's prioritizing what is aligned with your values and aligned with your health and making sure that there's time for that every day, even if it's imperfect.
Yeah, amen to all of that. And I love actually that you pull on this notion of what you call mom's hierarchy of needs, Leslie, because you are the first person that I have ever stumbled upon, other than myself, that really makes that such a paramount part of what we put forward. But I approach it a little bit differently. I talk about this in episode 81. So if anybody wants to listen, I will link that in the show notes. But I talk about how Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows up inside organizations, most specifically that they focus on the top half of Maslow's hierarchy, most particularly relative to development, talent development and learning, where they're like, how do I make you a better practitioner? How do I help you sharpen the saw so you learn all these technical skills? But as you know, with
Mhm.
Maslow, you're never going to be at your best as a person if your base is not cared for. So organizations try to like shortcut getting somebody to the top so they can be at their best. But yet, most organizations don't give people the breathing room they think they do to really able to be human and to be able to take care of their most basic needs. And oftentimes, as women, we don't even really know how to. We're just
Mm,
going at such a frenetic pace that we don't take the time. We have the time. We don't take the time to call the time out and say, whoa, that was crazy. What do I like? This is not sustainable. What do I do about it? Or how can I manage it differently? But I would love to hear from you.
mhm.
What was that moment of clarity for you where you're like, okay, there is a hierarchy here and it has changed the way that I think about this. Like, was there a particular insight? Was it the mapping of the needs itself? Was there, what made you so confident in your decision that something needs to change about the way that you're managing all of your pieces?
It felt forced at the time. I felt like I was failing at everything. I had worked so hard to get into, first of all, a career where I could really demonstrate value. I prided myself on being responsive and hardworking and committed and creative, all the things that really kept getting me promoted through the years before I had kids. So I identified with those traits. That sharpening of the saw, you described it so well, like as organizations were shaping and molding and encouraging me to get better and better and better at these skills, I had the discretionary time to pour into that for the years before kids because I was really blessed to be born healthy. Like I'm a healthy person. I didn't need a lot of sleep. I was able to put my energy and time into these things that I found really interesting and valuable. And I loved all the Atta girls, right, that came with that. So I built so much identity in that. Also, as I kind of share in the book, financial stability was a critical part of the career path that I chose. There was a period in my life, early, kind of mid childhood, where we were not financially stable. So I felt like my career was the anchor that kept me in a good place financially. So for all those reasons, I just attached a whole bunch of identity to it. But when I felt like I wasn't doing well in this job that I loved because they demanded more from me, precisely when my family demanded more, my kids demanded more, my lifestyle demanded more, and I hadn't updated my infrastructure to do less or to do things differently. I just knew that I was drowning and my family was thriving. They were doing great. I was not. I also knew that there were so many times I felt like I was just like scratching the surface and trimming around the edges of things where I used to be able to go deep. And I didn't like that feeling either. So all of those conditions, in addition to other people asking me if I was okay, really kind of broke it all open. And I was forced to make a change, and the job was the first thing that had to change. And I'll give you an example because I know you know it well because you've spent a lot of time in corporate. I was working on very time sensitive, like strategic plans and negotiations and partner opportunities. And there'd be times where we'd all be messaging each other in real time at like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, right? And like one of my male colleagues who often had fabulous dad, by the way, but had a partner who was at home full time doing all the things in the home and with the kids. So it's like, hey, let's jump on a call. We're all up. And he and myself and our lawyer, we'd be talking at midnight because everybody was up. But I had different responsibilities at home. And I was trying to do all these things that I really valued at the same level, in the same way, without asking for help, without explaining how it was costing me in my personal life and professional life. I also often share with people, everyone wants to be excellent at everything, right? Like you don't want to be a bad partner or a bad mother or a bad child to your aging parents or a bad sister or a bad friend. Like we all hold the bar up here. And when it starts to feel like you are compromising those identities and those commitments, you'll blow something up to fix it. And it's not a sustainable state to remain feeling badly about yourself and how you show up.
Yep. I wrote down as you were talking, Leslie, like literally wrote it on a post-it note because I want to put that in front of one of my clients. The I'm addicted to Atta Girls resonated so much with
Mhm.
what you just said. So I just got off a call with one of my clients. I generally don't meet with them one-on-one. We meet as a group, but I called a timeout and was like, girlfriend, we need to process some stuff. So let's do this offline. And that's essentially where I think she continues to swirl is she's used to being able to do things at a level that she is no longer able to do with two kids. And I mean, that was, I think, a lesson. It sounds like it's been a lesson for both of us. That first kid was like, I got this. That second kid, man, will
Exactly.
humble you and anybody who has three or more, absolute respect. But you don't like when you have one kid, people that don't have kids just assume that, yeah, you have kids. Of course, it takes a lot of time. When you have one kid, though, you're like, I don't understand why it's so hard. Then you have the second, and you're like, oh, I'm eating my words.
Absolutely. It flattens your
Yes.
infrastructure has to change. And
Yep.
most of us kind of want to set it and forget it. We think, all right, I've got this going. I've got my childcare setup, whatever it is, and I'm good. But it has to keep changing because
Yep.
their needs change. They demand more. You sleep less. Everything is in motion, and your infrastructure has to move right along with it.
Exactly. And that's what the life management system's all about is how do I help you define how your infrastructure needs to shift using your language, your routines, your rhythms, your what systems you need to put in place. How does your ecosystem support you? How do you add more ecosystem? All in the interest of your unique circumstances, like how many kids do you have? What special needs do they have? What family support do they have? Like what does your commute look like? What does your job look like? What does your partner's job look like? What does your co-parenting circumstances look like? What do you value, you and your partner value? Like all of that stuff matters. And to your point, it has to shift as those conditions and those needs shift. But this client is learning that the hard way. And one of the things that we uncovered this morning that's really getting in her way more than anything is that addiction to Atta Girls. That addiction to like,
Mm.
I am used to this becoming such a part of who I am and my identity that I'm having a hard time decoupling how that looks in a world that looks very different than it did before I had the second kid. And it's like, I get it. So many of us get it. It's like,
It's huge, but we're
yeah,
rewarded. Like we're rewarded all around in our careers. It's promotions, it's praise, it's attention. It's like having the wind at your back to keep going and doing more. And then in society, we are rewarded. So it's really uncomfortable to disrupt those rewards. It's really uncomfortable to admit that you need your infrastructure to change or that you have less time or you need to do less things when everyone around you and most of the systems that you're part of will encourage you to overextend yourself and praise you for doing so and not recognize the internal cost that it has.
yeah. So let's talk about the internal cost. You have done a ton of research with other parents over the past 5 or 6 years, Leslie. Are there any big insights that have come out of that or anything that's particularly surprised you in engaging so many different parents?
Oh, so many things. There was a time in my research study, it now is close to 4,000 parents who've participated in the study since March of 2020. 97% of them are women. So it is a very mom-centric study, obviously, based on the work that I do. But when I'm in the employer sphere, if I'm running a private study inside of an employer, it's very similar. Like the results are surprisingly similar, even when the gender mix is much more balanced. But there have been times where I've heard people asking for flexible expectations at work more than money and valuing flexible expectations at work more than money. Because what is happening in just about every industry, especially in this post-pandemic climate, is that people are being paid the same amid rising costs to deliver more with less resources. And that weight is really starting to eat away at people because I keep seeing in my study, oh my gosh, well, I'm being asked to deliver the same KPIs, but I have half the staff or a third of the budget, or we now have all this competition, or our industry is imploding, all of those things. So unreasonable demands or on our time and on our resources when the conditions are different is probably a really big theme in personal and professional life. Another is that there are times where people, when asked what do you need to be happy? What do you need to be productive? And what do you need to be at your best from a well-being perspective, or to make more time for self-care? And the top three answers were the same: childcare, flexibility at work, and access to mental health care, regardless of whether it was happiness, productivity, or time for self-care and well-being. So there's a lot around infrastructure and access and expertise and support, like even what you just described, right? The work that you do, helping people really get underneath the flavor of what their experience is and how their life is structured and what levers they have to pull. People need that. People need support for that. People need community around it. But employers are not necessarily on board in all cases. So navigating a renegotiation or a revised dialogue at work is often part of that, depending on the nature of career and work life needs that people have. So that's there. I think we also are crushed by the fact that there's a huge mental health crisis for children right now. That is, if not equivalent to, higher than the mental health crisis for adults. So mothers in particular, who still do the majority of childcare and household, including chief medical officer role in the family, in most families, are spending so much time navigating these systems that broke in the pandemic, like trying to find a specialist, waiting for hours to get that appointment, to get that neuropsych test, to get that IEP program set up, right? All of that takes a huge amount of time. And it's different than it was even 5 years ago. So if you're interacting with the childcare system, the healthcare system, or the education system, which all of us are at some level, the time required to navigate those systems that are so capacity constrained is just ebbing away at our inboxes, at our clarity. And it's just often an unnamed pressure that hovers over how we live daily life. In my opinion, raising the stakes on self-care practices and the prioritization of fueling yourself when the conditions are so much more complicated is really critical.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I can empathize with the pressure that a lot of organizations carry, because everybody, I mean, the pressure is coming from all sides. The market is putting that on them, and it continues to, to cascade down the way. But at the same time, at what point is this going to bust? And we're as collectively, we get to a point where it's like, this is just unsustainable on a human level.
Mm-hmm. And
So
organizations, I think, and managers, organizations, individual workers, like we all kind of want the same things, right? Yeah. People want to do great work. They want people to do great work. People want to have sustainable work life. They want to have sustainable work life. Like everybody has very aligned goals, but the pressures and the measurement and what constitutes a job well done and the rewards are uneven.
Yeah. So for the majority of our listeners, Leslie, they're first of all cheering us on because they know that we can make and are praying that we make a big difference in helping shift the narrative inside organizations. But they know that I also often say we have to focus on what's in our control. And there's only so much that even, even more louder voices like ours can make a difference on. So if they were to focus on what's inside their control, changing policy at work is not one of them. What are ways that come to mind for you that might be more practical, that meet them where they are, but still give them a chance to shift either the narrative at work or the way that they engage with the workplace that feels within their control and not necessarily like they're asking for some form of special treatment?
Absolutely. I would start with kind of understanding that there's some stressors that disproportionately hit us hard and really like kind of compete to erode our clarity. A lot of us know about the mental load, right? Because that's been discussed a lot in recent years. But it's more than just the mental load or cognitive load or having way too many things to do that you're trying to remember and hold on to in your working memory. Our bodies don't like it. Our brains don't like it. It feels bad. But I particularly talk to parents, especially moms, about decision fatigue. Like when I started researching that and learned that there's a biological limit to how many decisions we can make in a day, of course I was unhappy to learn it. I was like, what? What? How come no one tells us this? But it also made me reorient the way I made decisions throughout the day. Like most of us are paid to think in our professional lives. So if you spent all morning like picking out shoes and looking at the online shopping cart and deciding which of the five sippy cups to use and all those things, you feel like your mind has been in a shredder by 9 a.m. So pushing those like decision fatigue draining things into like the evening is something I've done personally. Like if my kids need new shoes, if someone needs new soccer cleats, like those things, I don't do them during the workday. I've like eliminated that from my workday so that I have more clarity and more energy for the decisions that matter more. That's one. Another is really whatever self-care means to you, what feels fueling, what gives you ease and relaxes your stress, putting that into your daily life in a very practical way. So I often tell people, you might love climbing the Swiss Alps, but unless you live in the Swiss Alps, it can't be that. It has to be something you can do every day, right? For me, running is my medicine, and that is how I like reset every day. But it could be a 5-minute walk. It could be a 30-minute walk. There might be days where you only have time to walk around in your building or in your home or up and down your stairs. But if walking is a thing that resets you, make that a daily practice in whatever way it fits. Find time for your self-care or your deep work time where you have sufficient time to do the thing and you have sufficient energy to do the thing. So I often tell people, like I had a parent in one of my employer sessions, a dad, who really wanted to relearn to play the guitar. And I haven't been getting to it. And I'm not sure why. And he's beating up on himself for not getting to it. And I asked him, I'm like, when are you practicing? He's like, oh, well, after I've done work and after the kids are asleep and after. So it was like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, come on, you really feel energetic to learn something new at 11 o'clock at night? Most of us don't, right? Because we're waking up early. So find a slot where you can engage in the thing that fuels you when you have energy to engage with it, in addition to when you have time. Like maybe that is during a block where you have ideally energy, time, and coverage, childcare coverage, if you also have elder care responsibilities, ensuring that that window is a window where you're going to get the result that feels fueling to you. And it doesn't have to be a huge time block, right? Maybe it's 10 or 15 minutes, but looking for those conditions where you can realize the potential of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and to your point, you put first things first, and that's how you fit it in is by putting first things first. Otherwise, there's never enough space in the day if you're not actually prioritizing it. Well, I love, Leslie, how simply you illustrated what self-care looks like, and most especially that repair and using your language. Pulled from the book Repair with Self-Care, which of course I'll link in the show notes as well. Like repair really can look like small steps. It's prioritizing that space for yourself and recognizing we deserve it. So, to take us
Absolutely.
home, I would love to move on to the lightning round questions that I ask every guest. So the first one, Leslie, what is your go-to stress busting activity?
Running every
Uh,
day,
I'm sure it's
rain,
very
shine,
therapeutic.
absolutely.
Cold up there where
And
you are in Boston.
oh, today is gorgeous. But until like a minute ago, it was cold and frigid. But I've got like ice wraps for my shoes. I have like gear for every type of weather. And just being outside in nature and running is magical for me.
I'm
So that's a
sure.
daily go-to.
Okay, and what was the last book or podcast you loved?
So I do a lot of book reviews for my website. I recently read Dr. Corinne Lowe's new book, Having It All,
Yeah, it's
and
great.
it was fascinating. Exactly. Like she really takes an economist lens to like optimizing the conditions in your life. And I thought it was super interesting. And she was a lovely human to talk to as well.
Yeah, I really geek out on her stuff. And I'm jealous of all of her students.
Yes.
Next, if you could wave a magic wand, what task would you eliminate forever?
Cleaning and decluttering, if I can put them together, figuring out how to responsibly dispose of the skateboard that's 5 years old that the kids have outgrown, but it's like not something you put in the trash. It's made of plastic and you have to put it on Craigslist or put it out there for free and develop a sign for it or find somebody who wants one. It's exhausting and it like sucks up your brain and it sucks up all your time. And I've reached a point where I cannot stand cleaning. I wish I never had to clean again, which is very
Yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah, I know. I mean, especially because it's not something we can get out of anytime soon, right? But I will
Right.
say, I just discovered that there is this whole ecosystem of people that are so eco-conscious that they have made like
Mm.
a dark web on the internet of Facebook groups where they will come and get all of your things to upcycle for you or to shift and like find new homes and owners for. Yeah, there's a web of them out there. So look in your local Facebook groups, find your person and just like have them come and pick stuff up from you. It is
Oh,
incredible. But the other thing that I leveraged quite a
cool.
bit is for
Thank
anything
you.
that's, yeah, it's right. So I
I'm
there were
like, I'm
all of
jotting that
these
down.
there were all of these old beach toys and that sort of thing, which don't feel like something I could donate, but still had life left in them. And they're like, oh no, don't get rid of, like, don't throw any of that away unless it's broken. No, I promise you there's a purpose for it. So I have skis
Oh,
that I gave away this past week that are at least 20 years old that are completely not usable, but they can be repurposed for maybe decoration in a garage or a man cave or something. The other thing that I've discovered in the past couple years that's been game changing is for the things like a very usable skateboard that you can donate.
mm.
I will collect all of that in a box, and every month there are people like the kidney foundations and Hope House, that like abuse centers and that sort of thing, that will come and pick your donations up from your house. Again, it doesn't get rid of the clutter immediately, but every month they reach out to me and they say, hey, we're doing pickups in your area. Do you have anything? So I just get my box out and just stick it right outside. So
I
it's not
love
like it doesn't
that.
fix the, like, you can't snap your fingers, but it is the path of least resistance, I'm convinced. Okay, Leslie, the
Oh,
last question. How do
fantastic.
people reach you?
Momshierarchyofneeds.com is kind of where all the things are. So resources, information about the book, tons of articles. I have a wellness app, Time Check, that allows you to track your top of the hierarchy time in less than a minute a week. So that's probably the best place. I'm also the only social media platform where I'm the most active is really LinkedIn. So I'm
Okay.
happy to be discovered there too.
Perfect. Well, I will include all of that in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining us, listeners. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Life Management System. And if you are hearing during our conversation that you have some breathing room that you need to seek in order to repair your self-care and you don't know where to start, I have a 3-minute quiz that will help you identify the places you're probably leaking your time and energy. So I will include that in the show notes as well. But until next time, friends, if nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, Mama. If this conversation resonated, episode 81 is your next stop. We go deep there on what organizations and managers can actually do to support caregivers before they hit a breaking point, including that one question you can ask in your next check in that changes everything. The link's right below.